How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is part 4 of What If Deku Had Sunshine. And now, before I start this What If off, I would just like to say that I'm sorry that the part 3 thumbnail said Shunshun instead of Sunshine. It's actually quite funny looking back on it now. I even made it an emoji in my channel Discord server, a link in the description if you have yet to join that. But now, let's begin. Welcome back, class, from your break. I hope all of you are training over that time, or else I may have to be forced to move you down to one of the general courses, or maybe even Class 1B. It'd actually be quite cool to see the terror on some of your faces when you realize you have to move down to one of the lower level classes. So, anyway, you should have been training over that time. And just to let you all know, all of the Class 1B and General Course teachers have told all of their students if they perform well in the sports festival, they have the chance to move up into the Hero Course, and they may even take one of your spots. So I suggest you all try to perform as best you can. So now, let's head on to the bus and go to the locker rooms where we will then get changed into your UA uniforms, or PE uniforms rather, and then we'll head out onto the field by direction of the loudspeaker. You probably won't see me until the end of it after you all leave the bus. So I suggest this is the best information I can give you until one of you most likely ends up winning, so I don't see one of Class 1A's people end up winning. So, let's head down to the bus bay. All of the students would hurry off to the bus bay, where they would then hop onto the Class 1A bus, where it would then speed down the road off it towards the other side of campus, where the UA Sports Festival Coliseum was built. So once it would arrive, they would all head into the locker rooms, get changed before sitting down in the waiting room, waiting for something interesting to happen, so that they could be just called out. However, the doors that would end up slowly creaking open, as they would then hear over the loudspeaker that UA was now coming onto the field, or Class 1A of UA was now coming onto the field. They would all walk onto the field as all of the classes would end up just glaring right at them as the crowd would roar in excitement. This was the next generation of top hero prospects, and they couldn't wait to see their favorite heroes in the future go in action today. It was quite cool, actually. All the people inside the Coliseum, along with the people watching at home, would end up seeing at midnight the pro hero walk out from a mysterious door onto a podium. Good evening, everyone. Well, should I say good morning, actually. Today we are going to be holding the first year sports festival. So get excited. This is the next generation of heroes you'll be looking at today. Well, at least for Class 1B and Class 1A. But that doesn't mean the general course students aren't going to be fantastic to watch either, along with the support course, using some of their gadgets that they've made. So, why don't we begin with the first event here for the sports festival? Let me see, what should it be? Aha, a race sounds like it'd be a perfectly good first event. So let's get that started. The rules are you will have 30 minutes to travel around a certain area that will have 3 different obstacles you'll have to see as the race goes on. Once that 30 minutes is up, and if you don't cross the finish line, you will be eliminated, unless 42 of the contestants pass that finish line before the 30 minutes is up. If you're not inside that 42 contestants, you would end up being eliminated. So get there before your fellow peers end up beating you there. So now, a hero will now direct you on it towards where the race will be held. All of the students would then be pushed into a small, narrow hallway, as many of them would be pushing and shoving to try to get to the front. All of a sudden, the door would end up opening, as many of the students would start to rush out, as the pushing and shoving would only grow and grow. Izuku, however, wouldn't be having this, deciding to push his way through everyone, easily making for everyone to just go right away to the side, not wanting to have to deal with being pushed or being thrown down to the ground, along with Izuku, who was determined to get to the front. Once Izuku has gotten to the front, he would end up launching himself forward, doing this with huge strides, easily passing anyone who had gotten their way through the hallway first and was in the first 10 of the ranks. Izuku would easily become first place, as he would end up making it towards where a zero-pointer was being just standing there. He would end up seeing 2 more zero-pointers behind him, as Izuku would just decide to hopefully try to outrun them, deeming as it would take too much time for him to deal with them. So, with Izuku sprinting past, the zero-pointers being way too slow, couldn't grab him. So they would be forced to deal with the entire crowd that was following behind Izuku. So with them, they would cause a major distraction, slamming their feet on the ground or picking up some of the fellow students behind Izuku. Izuku, however, easily passing through the zero-pointers, he would then make it onto the second round, or the second obstacle in the race. There, he would see just a massive drop-off with small stones connected by ropes. Izuku would jump from island to island, easily getting through that one as well. However, once it came to the minefield area, it was a bit more tricky. He wasn't sure where all of the minefields were being held, but he just decided that he could possibly just walk up the side of it, and there really wasn't going to be any minefields along the side. So he would sprint through the side, only encountering one minefield, or one mine, that ended up launching him even further than where he would have been. So it actually turned out to help him. Izuku would finish first, with no one even seeing him pass the finish line, as he had done it with such speed and precision that all of them were still getting past the zero-pointer, including Bakugo and Todoroki, who had just managed to get out of the hallway, where they would then see a giant zero-pointer right in front of them, as Bakugo had gotten unlucky to where he would end up being pushed down to the ground by Izuku in Izuku's way. So with Bakugo then on the ground, he would end up having to get up and then being trampled by the horde that had followed, with Izuku making a path to get through. So with Bakugo launching himself into first, he would end up seeing no one in his path and would then be like, "Hell yeah, I'm in first! Of course I'm gonna be the best here," as Bakugo would continue on rushing past all of the events before he would make it crossing the finish line, extremely excited. There he was, as he crossed the finish line, the crowd would cheer in excitement. However, it didn't sound like the loudest cheer it possibly could be, as there he would end up seeing Izuku just sitting around, staring at everything. However, this wasn't just in the normal Coliseum, as Bakugo had been walked toward the waiting room, where he would then see Izuku staring up at a TV, looking at the race. "How the hell did you beat me, Deku?" Bakugo would yell, as Izuku would just sort of laugh. "Oh, I guess you didn't see it. I was able to get out of the hallway quite quickly, and then I just easily passed through everything with quite speed. So I just tried to outspeed everything rather than to deal with it like someone or a brute would," as Bakugo would just sit there angrily wondering how he possibly could have gotten beaten by this, but would just shrug it off, knowing that he's going to beat Izuku in the finale for sure, knowing that throughout the past history of UA Sports Festival, there was always a finale, a 1v1 event as the final event. So Bakugo set his sights high, knowing he's going to get a gold medal for this sports festival. As the entirety of the 42 contestants would end up finishing, those who didn't would end up being eliminated. All of them who had passed would end up heading towards the locker room, as Midnight would end up calling them all back out after a 10-minute wait to give them some rest, as she would then explain the second event. "Alright everyone, the second event will be a cavalry battle. This is how it's going to work. There's going to be 3 people on the bottom carrying someone on top who's going to have a headband with points based on what they placed. The higher the points, the more it's going to be worth for the final score. So basically, whoever has the highest score ends up winning and going on to the next round. Only 4 teams will end up going on to the next round, so I suggest you try your hardest to pass through this." Everyone would end up looking on in shock, wondering what they were going to be able to do and if they were going to be able to pass through onto the next event. As a 5-minute break period would end up starting for all of them to choose who they wanted on their team. Izuku would end up building a team of people that he had just grown friends with, being Todoroki, Uraraka, and Ida. They had all decided to team up as they had gotten quite a good score in the race, and they just thought, well, maybe if they all worked together using their powers, they could easily blow through the competition, passing with the highest score, and possibly even making it through the tournament and possibly having one of their team members succeed. So, once the cavalry battle would begin, Izuku being on top would easily just cause everyone to stay back. They had saw what he had done in the hallway and would not want to be pushed back by Izuku's sheer power. However, there were a few risk takers, and this would cause everyone else to end up charging at Izuku as well. So with Izuku seeing that they were surrounded and everyone was charging at him, Izuku in the palm of his hand would then create a sun, throwing it up into the air, as the sun would then just start shining above everyone else, as the extreme heat would deter many people to stay back as far away as possible, as many of the people there would just be in shock how Izuku could just create a mini sun in his hands. While everyone was looking up at them, Izuku would yell for Todoroki to use his ice to basically just capture everyone in the iceberg. So when he would do this, everyone would get stuck in the iceberg right as Izuku would just stop the sun from existing so that the ice could not melt instantly. So with everyone then stuck in a massive glacier, they would basically just be awarded the victory and would then just be asked for them to unfreeze them, with him shattering the ice as the match would then continue. Many of them would look on towards midnight wondering what had happened, as they really couldn't hear anything. All they had saw in the iceberg was Todoroki walking off along with his team. Midnight would then explain to them how, since they had gotten everyone frozen, that they had just been awarded the victory and moved on to the next round. So now only 3 of you can make it onto the next round. So now the competition was even more fierce, as it started to get crazy. People were pushing each other down, launching each other across the battlefield, mostly Bakugo doing that to others, as everything was just chaos. As the 30-minute buzzer would end up timing, everyone would look on towards midnight, as they would end up hearing her say that those who had passed can now go on to the waiting room, while those who haven't could now go on into the stands to watch from above. Many people would begrudgingly end up walking off, hating that they didn't pass, and they would end up blaming Izuku's team for making it, so as they would end up lying to themselves, we were just 1 off. If that stupid Izuku kid didn't pass, we would have made it. As Izuku would end up being called out for the first match in the 1v1 tournament. Izuku was going to be going up against a kid named Shinso. Izuku wasn't sure who this kid was, but wouldn't really care, not minding what he could possibly do or what his quirk was, deciding he'll find that out on the battlefield. As the match would begin, Izuku would stare directly into the eyes of Shinso, breathing in and out, completely calming his mind. As Izuku would do this, he would then reach out onto his back before grabbing an axe and dropping it to the ground, as dust would explode up into the air, causing a distraction. As Shinso staring at the dust, waiting for Izuku to peer out of it, Izuku would rush right at Shinso, who was still staring right at the dust. With Izuku now rushing right towards Shinso, his eyes would then focus back towards the glowing figure rushing right at him. As Izuku would lift up the axe, he would then slash it down right next to where Shinso was, as a massive hole would then appear right next to him as Izuku would lift his axe up. He had completely cut through the concrete, as there Shinso was staring right at the cut. So, does that give you the confidence that you can still beat me? I guess not, as Izuku would reach out his hand towards Shinso before pushing him back with only 2 fingers. As Shinso would start to fall back, he would reach out, grabbing Izuku's arm, trying to pull himself up from where Izuku was. However, Izuku would only stand closer towards the edge, leaning over, as Shinso really wouldn't be able to push himself up anymore. Izuku was standing on his feet, as Shinso would then be falling back, losing his balance. With Izuku now off of Shinso's feet, he would fall back, falling onto the soft grass below, giving Izuku the ring-out victory. Izuku would walk away, not before giving a handout to Shinso, before congratulating on Shinso for making it this far, as he hopes to see him sometime later in his class. He had heard that Shinso had some sort of brainwashing quirk from one of his friends, and actually thought it was quite cool, and it could be very useful in hostage situations. So from that, Izuku would walk off, wondering what his next round would end up being. In the second round, Izuku would face off against Ida, as Ida, who was on his team, would then say, "Alright, Izuku, I'm sorry this team would have to break apart for this, but no matter, I'm gonna crush you," as Izuku would then merely laugh as the match would begin. Izuku would rush towards Ida, as Ida would only dodge using his speed. Izuku would grab the ground, grabbing some of the dust that was still left over from one of the other matches prior, before jumping up, throwing it into Ida's eyes. As Ida would grab his eyes, just saying how dirty of a trick that was, Izuku would just laugh. "Do you think villains won't play dirty in fights?" As Izuku would kick Ida up back behind, as Ida would then start falling down to the ground as he would try to catch himself. However, one of his hands was still on his eyes that were still very dusty. As he would land on his hand, twisting it back, he would then cry out in pain, having just broken his wrist. Izuku, then standing above him, would look over towards Midnight, saying that he doesn't think Ida can continue. However, Ida wouldn't have this be, lifting with his other hand up, with his eyes now closed. He's trying to sense where Izuku was, as Izuku would then laugh. "So, I guess you have quite the determination, Ida. Well, let's see how this goes." Izuku would then start tapping his feet everywhere he could, jumping around, tapping as fast as he could, causing Ida's head to swivel as much as he could, as Izuku would just be tapping all around Ida in a circle, causing Ida to turn in an endless circle, causing him to still get dizzy, even though his eyes were closed. As Ida would start spinning round and round, Izuku would then just decide to end it, lifting up his hand in sort of a chopping motion before slicing down on Ida, as Ida's uniform would then cut, as blood would then start coming out of this cut, with Ida then falling back, being knocked out, having just been so dizzy and the combination of his wrist and the pain, he just couldn't handle it. As Izuku would be awarded the victory, he would then move on to the semifinals, which had him paired up against Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku had seen that Todoroki was in the finale and knew he wanted to verse him, having shown Todoroki how and why his fire wasn't his father's, and knowing that he was going to be a good fight, especially against Todoroki. However, before he could make it, he had to face off against his childhood best friend before turning his bully, Bakugo Katsuki. So, as Izuku would stare... Sorry about that, guys. Something happened. So, anyway, Izuku would be faced up against his childhood bully, Bakugo. So, as the match would begin, both of them would launch towards each other, going blow for blow. Each fist and punch would be blocked with another fist or a kick, as this would continue on before both of them would jump back, as Izuku would then grab his axe off of his back. Bakugo would put his hands to his side before slamming both of his wrists together, before sending a massive explosion barreling towards Izuku. However, Izuku was having none of this, lifting up his axe in the air, slamming it down to the ground, as the wind caused by how fast Izuku had thrown his axe up and then slashed it down caused the explosion to split up, slamming into the side walls behind them. As Izuku would rush on towards Bakugo, Bakugo, having used so much of his energy with that one attack, couldn't comprehend the speed of Izuku, as Izuku would then slam the butt end of the axe right into Bakugo, causing Bakugo to be sent flying back into the wall behind him, giving Izuku the ring-out victory. As the next match would then begin, the finale. This was for the gold medal, and the loser would be awarded the silver. As Izuku would stand up on the arena, he would look on towards Todoroki before bowing, giving him just a sign that he wished for a good match, as Todoroki would do the same. After that, they would then go on about to fight, as the match would then begin. Todoroki would start off by sending an iceberg barreling towards Izuku, much like the massive attack Bakugo had used. However, right as it was about to hit Izuku, it just melted. It couldn't reach Izuku. As Izuku would continue on walking towards Todoroki, seeing that his ice wouldn't be useful against his fight, he would end up sending fire barreling towards Izuku. However, that wouldn't work, as it just couldn't affect Izuku. It seemed like heat wasn't going to work at all either. As Izuku would then take a step towards Izuku, and another one, as Todoroki would continue on sending attack for attack for attack for attack, and each time Izuku would take a step and a step, as Izuku would get closer and closer, showing that these attacks weren't going to work. So finally, Todoroki decided enough was enough, rushing towards Izuku, about to throw a punch. However, Izuku would just dodge before uppercutting Todoroki, sending him jumping backwards. Todoroki would then grab dirt beneath him, much like Izuku had, and would then try to throw it into Izuku's eyes. However, they were being shielded by Izuku's axe. Izuku would then drop the axe before punching Todoroki right in the gut, as Todoroki would look on dead into Izuku's eyes, as if trying to tell him what the hell, why won't my attacks work, as Izuku would merely just laugh. So I guess you've seen that your quirks are basically useless against me. It's just a very sad matchup, I guess. Well, it's a shame you'll have to lose like this, Todoroki. Izuku would punch Todoroki right in the face, uppercutting him before slamming him down into the ground. Todoroki would start to become dizzy from the amount of attacks that Izuku was continue landing. Everyone in the crowd was just shocked. Here were the two finalists, and it looked like one was just completely outmatched, while the other was one of the strongest people they'd ever seen. Izuku would continue on punching Todoroki and punching him, as Todoroki had finally decided and his body had just given up. With him going unconscious, Izuku was declared the victor, as a couple minutes later, a podium would end up being set up. Bakugo in third, Izuku would be in first, and there standing in the middle would end up being Todoroki. And that is where I'm going to leave this What If off, everyone. I hope you all did enjoy part 4 of What If Deku had Sunshine. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.